Right now it's Sunday, October 14th, and that means that not only is there a new Doctor Who episode, also, coincidentally, my birthday. Yay, hooray! And the only excuse possible for me wearing this dumb hat. Time to talk about The Ghost Monument, Episode 2, Series 11, and for whatever reason, I was not aware of the fact that Chibnall was also writing this episode, which I suppose should have been a given. And getting opinions out of the way right off the top, I unfortunately am really lukewarm on this episode. I think there are a fair number of positives to it, but at the same time, I think it's one of Chibnall's weaker stories. I don't think it really holds that much of a candle to last week's, and I feel I can empathize much more with the people who reacted a bit negatively to this episode, because I've been keeping track of reactions to this episode on social media and stuff. There are a few people who prefer the Ghost Monument to The Woman Who Fell to Earth, even if only slightly. Like I said, I think it has its positives, and I'll go into that momentarily, but I'm more with the crowd that thought The Woman Who Fell to Earth was stronger. I suppose I'm gonna start off by talking about the two big things. I suppose you could say, unfortunately, two biggest, most noteworthy things about this episode. Starting with the opening. The opening is spectacular. Easily the best that any Doctor Who intro sequence has ever looked, I think. We're not doing the face thing anymore, which I appreciated while it was, around. And we're also not doing the TARDIS in flight through the vortex, which I think is the first time that we are not doing that sort of visual in any modern Doctor Who opening. It is such its own thing. And I really appreciate that, how unique it feels. I also really like the orchestration. It's not my favorite version of the theme. My favorite version of the theme remains... it's a three-way tie between the 1996 TV movie theme, the Sixth Doctor Trial of a Time Lord theme, and the Series 4 with Ten and Donna. Those are my three favorite versions of the theme musically, but visually, I don't think the opening sequence has ever looked this good, ever. And I'm so glad that this is what we went with aesthetically. The TARDIS? Not so much. I don't know. It doesn't look bad, I don't think. It's very much like the Russell era sort of grunge look, as they've taken to calling it, in that it's not to my taste, I guess I should say. Where I didn't quite care for the kind of organic machinery vibe that 9 and 10's TARDIS had. And here it seems like we're kind of doing that again, but it's almost like a 70s Superman Kryptonian, crystal architecture type look. It looks like amber or a honeycomb almost. And I don't know, it's a unique choice. I think it's gonna take a while to grow on me. The console, though, I like the weird sort of hourglass mechanism and the little clear prism version of the TARDIS that spins around. No idea what purpose it serves, but I like the console. But anyway, to talk more about the meat of this episode, the first thing that I will give it, and you could argue this is maybe a negative because it couldn't have been utilized in a better episode, but the first thing I will give it is that I like the premise. I like the idea of the Doctor and companions kind of being thrown into the last leg of this intergalactic race, where we started with, I think it was said, 4,000 competitors at the beginning, and now we are on the last two. And I think that could be a really interesting episode or series of episodes in its own right. The Doctor and companions taking part in a kind of race like that. Again, the thing that Chibnall likes to do, which I praised him for last time, making characters and events feel like they exist outside of the confines of the episode. On that level, I like that it's a race where we are entering at the end and we are witnessing the last two competitors in the home stretch. And those competitors are Epzo and Angstrom. And Chibnall, I think, is generally good with characterizing his side players, or his one-off, one-episode-only characters. And these two, I'm feeling very iffy on. I feel like the way that they're handled is my biggest issue with the episode. Because the thing about the Ghost Monument is it's the Doctor and companions and these two racers heading for the thing called the Ghost Monument. And the Ghost Monument, as it turns out fairly early on, is the TARDIS. We never got to it at the end of last episode, so the idea here is that they help these two guys complete the race, and then they get to the end, and it's the TARDIS, and they get to go home. I appreciate elements of it, like the fact that it's on a deserted planet, and we have all of these sort of obstacles, like sniper robots and killer rags, which some people were thrown off by. Understandably, some people couldn't put up with the killer pieces of cloth. I didn't have much of an issue with them. Again, that's another thing where it's like, on the one hand, yes, we're probably only doing this because we're on a budget and we couldn't really spring for another creative weapon or alien design. But on the other hand, it's another level of, like, this is an alien thing. Like, no human beings would think of rags that float around and murder you and also feed on your fears, that kind of thing. But this alien race did it, and I don't know, I feel like I'm really coming to appreciate even the stupid things in this show that are just like, oh yeah, of course a human didn't think of that. I can't really put it in terms beyond what I've already said, but that's one of the little things that I like for people to do with sci-fi. But, yeah, I think the thing that maybe doesn't kill this episode, because it's not horrible, it's just kind of uninteresting, which is a shame with such a good premise. And the thing that kind of does it in for me is the handling of Angstrom and Epzo, because there are things about them that I like. I like the sort of antagonistic rapport that they have. I like that they seem like the kind of friends who hate each other and are only friends due to proximity, like that kind of thing. Like, there's an interesting relationship there between the two of them. And Angstrom is the more sympathetic, likable of the two, and she gets her own, tragic backstory of, like, I'm trying to get this prize so that I can go back, save my family, my planet is in trouble, that kind of thing. I don't know, it's just because there's not all that much in the middle of this episode to talk about that isn't just some very slight character stuff. And my big problem with it is that I think this is an episode that lived or died on how it ended, and the ending is unfortunately really weak. Where I don't mind this being a sort of slow, atmospheric episode, where it's mostly just walking around this environment. But when we get to the ending, and the ending, the ultimate resolution on one side of things is that they make it through the whole race, and Epzo and Angstrom are still, at each other's throats about who's going to earn the prize, and the Doctor suggests that they go in together, go in as a tie, split the prize between themselves. That is, on paper, the emotional climax of this episode, right? And that should play as more of a strong moment than it does. And yet I feel like on multiple levels, on an editing level, on a pacing level, that moment just doesn't land as anything, you know? Where that should be the culmination of a slow build and a slow change in Angstrom and Epso's relationship over the course of the episode, and like how the Doctor, maybe the presence of the Doctor and Ryan and Yasmin Graham affects their dynamic from what we see it as at the beginning, but their dynamic doesn't really change. Even to the bitter end, they're like, I deserve the prize, no, I deserve it, that sort of thing. And so when they walk into the tent for their prize at the end together as a pair, and they're really adamant about, like, you split the prize between us, or, like, it's gonna be consequences for you, man. It's pretty, I think, lackluster. And I feel like if the episode sold that moment, then the whole thing would play better. Although there is also an element of just some of the dialogue in that scene isn't that great, like, you pay the prize, you pay the price. That line bugged me for some reason. And episode going up to the guy, the guy in charge of the race, I think Ilan is his name, he goes up to him and he threatens him with like this whole macho, thready thing. And it doesn't really play because Epso's been kind of a pathetic, like unlikable jerk character. I want to say that this episode suffers from 45-minute syndrome, or not enough time syndrome, as Stewbag from who does the He Who Moans Doctor Who reviews would call it. In fact, I'm willing to bet that that issue comes up by name in his eventual review of this episode. But yeah, this is an episode that maybe could have benefited from being longer, maybe could have benefited from cutting out one or two particular scenes. Had it not been such a moment of they suddenly decide off-screen to go right from still competing with each other to like complete 180, working together. I don't know, that whole handling of that moment felt like it really killed the episode for me. And also, just while I'm still on negatives, I will get back to things that I like, but while I'm still on negatives, I think the cinematography of this episode, for the most part, pretty good. I like all the location shooting. And again, like last episode, I like how filmic it feels in spots. Unfortunately, unlike last episode, we really go crazy with extreme close-ups this episode. Like, there's so many shots in this episode where characters' faces are this close to the camera, and it's quite distracting. So that's unfortunate. I can't recall another Doctor Who episode where camera decisions like that have taken me out so much, and yet it was a constant distraction for me this time around, just how we would not back the camera off of people's faces. I know that there are some people who react badly to the implications of sort of an ongoing story arc in this episode. Namely because the impression that we got from interviews with Chibnall and some of the cast members were that we were not going to be doing an ongoing story this season. And I was personally really looking forward to that. I was really looking forward to a season or a series of mostly standalone episodes, if not entirely standalone episodes. And it's entirely possible that that's still what we get. I'm not throwing any disparagement yet. What we have here are, like I said, implications, and it all depends on how those implications are carried out. Because we have kind of two things. We have the Stenza, who was the species of Tim Shaw from last episode, get a name drop here. They are the species that sort of caused this planet that the Ghost Monument is set on to be desolate and abandoned, and all of the obstacles were the result of scientists being forced by the Stenza to create like killer robots and killer rags and poison the water with deadly killer microbes and stuff. And Angstrom reveals that the Stenza also killed some of her family. and are the reason that her own planet is under siege. So a lot of people take that to mean that the Stenza are going to be a recurring sort of issue in this season or series, that they're going to be the arc is going to be dealing with the Stenza and the repercussions of them. I don't immediately assume that yet. I can totally see this being a case of this episode is in many ways a direct follow-up to The Woman Who Fell to Earth, and so for that reason we reincorporate an element of the previous episode. I don't fully expect that to be the case, but I could completely see it being a reality. I don't know. I won't be angry or too disappointed if we do end up going the series arc route, because for as much as I disparage certain arcs that we've done in this show, I think it's happened less often than a lot of people like to pretend it does, that the arcs have distracted or taken away from the individual quality of the episodes. I want to say it was only really a problem in Series 7 and 8, where the arcs were outright intrusive, and where episodes would be retroactively made less interesting or would have really, really important time taken away from them for the sake of an arc. I don't think that's what we're going to do with this series. My fingers are crossed that the Stenza thing was just a one-off reference in follow-up to the previous episode. The other thing that is maybe alluding to an arc is the mention of the timeless child, which has, I will admit, all the standard markings of a Moffat mystery box thing, where it's like, oh, the timeless child, what could that be? And it's something from the Doctor's past that she is clearly affected by, and it might be her. I don't know. I suppose I'm curious as to what it is, but I do empathize with the camp that feels legitimately jilted that we seem to be setting up another mystery arc in this season, when I was really hoping that we would get away from that and that we could get back to having Doctor Who be just a series of episodes where each episode was its own thing and played to its own strengths. And I don't really know. This whole thing is something where I'm waiting until the series gets further along to pass judgment. Not even to the end of the series, but, once we get a good ways in, and I'll see if most of the episodes are strong standalone features. But, to sort of close out with, again, getting back to some of the positives that I have about this episode, I like more of the character building that's being done for the companions, particularly Graham. I like all three of them still. I like that Yaz and Ryan seem to have a really nice sort of dynamic where they defer to each other a lot, and Yaz is very patient and supporting with Ryan's dyspraxia, and Ryan himself, that's still a major part of his character. We haven't forgotten about that. Except for one scene, which is a problem and maybe my least favorite scene of the episode outside of the resolution, which is the whole discussion that Ryan and the Doctor have about guns, where Ryan picks up a gun and the Doctor's like, nope, we don't use guns, I hate guns. And I don't know, I suppose on paper I don't mind a Doctor who dislikes guns, but I found that to be one of the 10th Doctor's more insufferable character traits, especially when it was played up. And I hope that's not something that comes up often. I prefer it when the Doctor can be fine with firearms in the appropriate circumstance. But my real issue with that scene is that Ryan picks up a gun, and he's like, Call of Duty, I trained my whole life for this, let's do it. And he runs out and shoots a whole bunch of robots, and the robots, just sort of retaliate and come back at him, and he can't reload, and it's just funny, he has a funny line delivery. But it seems like for that scene, we completely forgot the dyspraxia, where he just runs out and shoots all of these robots, like one-shots all of them, like 5 or 6 of them, no problem. If the dyspraxia is as bad as we've been told it is and been shown that it is, then I'm not even sure that I buy that Ryan, plays Call of Duty or plays video games with regularity. I've only done the most cursory of research on the condition of dyspraxia in between last episode and now. So if I'm missing something about the effects of that disorder, if there's truth to Ryan's ability to do these things while at the same time in this episode having problems like climbing ladders and stuff, then please feel free to let me know in the comments. But I don't know, just on the surface, going off of the little that I know, it feels very... That scene feels very out of place and surprisingly lazy. But like I said, I like the dynamic between everyone still. I like Graham especially. He's really trying his best to be fatherly to Ryan, and Ryan's just not having it. And Graham, I think, is trying to fill the hole that Grace left for both of them. And he has really kind of stepped up. And in between last episode and now, it's sort of like a switch turned on for him, where last episode he was the guy who very much wanted to stay out of the action and was kind of, not the pessimist, but the one with the most negative outlook. And he could be kind of harsh to Ryan in token moments. And I don't think that's fully gone away. He is still very frank with him, but he really is trying to have their relationship and try to have them be who they need for each other, and I really appreciate that. I want to say that the scene where they talk to each other on the boat is my favorite bit of the episode. And I hope that this whole character dynamic stays grounded in moments like that. And we got a little bit of insight into Yaz's family. I hope we get more personal moments of her in the coming episodes. And yeah, I don't know. Jodie's great, as she was last time. She doesn't have as much to work with, I don't think, as last episode. I'm unfortunately just really kinda meh on this episode, which is a shame because if anyone watched on the Red Lightning channel my discussion with Lucy and Edward about The Woman Who Fell to Earth, then you know that they are way more negative on that episode than I was. And I really am not looking forward to discussing this episode and having it be the three of us be all negative. But I feel like this is maybe Chibnall's weakest Doctor Who episode. Maybe the weakest thing I've seen from him outside of his Torchwood stuff. I hope that The Woman Who Fell to Earth is more indicative of this series and his work on coming episodes than this one is. I'm really not sure what went wrong in the process with this one, but I think it's just kind of weak. Next week's episode is going to be about Rosa Parks. I've known that was going to be an episode for a while, and I'm still kind of trying to wrap my head around what it could be. And I'm just really curious as to, what that is. But yeah, I really don't want this video to be as much of a downer as I know it's going to. But I'm just kind of in this place where, coming off of last week's episode, I was really, really excited. But this episode kinda has tempered my enthusiasm slightly. I hope you enjoyed watching or listening to this video. Please give me your thoughts on this episode in the comments, especially if you're someone who really liked this episode. we can have a discussion about some more potential positives, so that when I go back to this episode, maybe I'll enjoy it more. But in the meantime, like and subscribe so that you can keep up with this stuff. I'm going to be doing these weekly. And yeah, see you later.